Adventures of the Decepticons Pet Ghost by Played Crowd 5610. Part 3 of Hunting the Nemesis. Chapter 11. Additional medical assistance required. Sorry. Danny gets severely injured after a fight with a Soul Eater and some hunters, and the Decepticons don't know what to do. Knockout's tools aren't small enough for this, so they only have one option. They need to get some help. Danny stumbled through the halls of the Nemesis, his vision swimming as he clutched his side. He was safe here, at least. His body screamed in pain. The fight with the Soul Eater had been bad enough, but there were hunters close behind who turned their guns on Danny as soon as they saw him. He'd managed to escape them barely. Now, though, it was catching up to him, ectoplasm oozing from the wound, staining his tattered shirt already covered in burn marks and claw slashes. He pressed his hand against one of the largest wounds. A blast from the hunters managed to land on his stomach, right on top of a huge scratch mark the Soul Eaters gave Danny with their talons moments prior. Everything was getting blurry. He just needed to get to Starscream's room so he could patch himself up ASAP. He rounded a corner, his breath coming out ragged gasps. When his leg finally gave out, he collapsed against the wall, sliding down it as his vision darkened. He could just rest here, right? Just for a moment? He was vaguely aware of footsteps, large ones, coming towards him. He tried his best to look up, his eyes landing on two familiar figures, Starscream and Knockout. They both froze, staring at him, wide-opticked. What in the pit happened? Starscream cut through the haze. Hey, Screamy. Then he chuckled wearily, before coughing ectoplasm into his fist, head falling back again with a thump against the Nemesis wall. Knockout stepped forward, optics quickly scanning over the human, crumbled on the floor. What happened to him? Then he tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words couldn't come out. He felt himself slipping as his form flickered. With his energy drained, he didn't fight the transformation that flowed over him as he turned into his human form, the green ectoplasm fading into red blood. Then everything went black. Starscream moved faster than Knockout had ever seen him. "Get to the medical bay!" he ordered, reaching down and scooping Danny up gently, something Knockout wouldn't have ever expected from the Air Commander. Knockout's optics widened at the sight of the red substance spilling over Starscream's surface. Wait, is that blood? His tone held a mix of horror and fascination. Starscream shot him a glare. Of course it's blood! He's a human! Knockout! What did you think? Did they leak Elmergon? It was green a second ago! Who knows what to think? Knockout snapped back, motioning to the bleeding human in Starscream's service. I'm not a doctor for organics. He is far too fragile for me to perform surgery. They were now running down the hallway, and Knockout paced the service against the panel to open the door to the medbay as Starscream cradled his precious pet in his service. Starscream placed Danny on the medical bath as gently as he could. The human looked far too small to be lying on that thing. "If you're as good as a doctor as you claim, try!" the Seeker hissed. Knockout shot him a glare. "I know you care about your human pet, Starscream, but this is absurd. There's no way I can work on him. His autonomy is all wrong. There are no micro-tools small enough for me to even attempt this. I can't just weld his flesh back together with new plating like I do with us. Organics are different." He waved his service around widely as he explained. Starscream's service clenched and unclenched, looking like he was about to scratch Knockout's face off. "Then what do you suggest we do?" Knockout exhaled sharply, rubbing his service down his faceplant in expiration. He began rifling through his medical equipment, though he knew none of it would work. "I don't know. I can run scans and get some readings, but without a human doctor, I can't do anything. Starscream gritted his dentate as he looked down at Danny's small, fragile form, bleeding out on the medical bath. Knockout scans showed the boy's vitals were dropping fast. Keep him stable, Starscream ordered, already spinning on his heel and heading for the door. Knockout glanced up from the equipment, surprised by the commander's sudden change. You're leaving? Where are you going? Knockout called after him, but the con was already out the door. Knockout cursed and then turned back to the human. What was he supposed to do now? Starscream launched off the ship as fast as his thrusters could take him and set course to a small human town in the middle of the desert that was only a few clicks from the Nemesis' current location. Knockout was right, and Danny was going to die sooner if Starscream didn't do anything. If Danny needed a human doctor, that's what Starscream would get. Not that he really cared about the human, but he was beginning to be useful and entertaining to have around. It would be beneficial to keep him around as long as possible, or at least that was what Starscream was telling himself. He scanned over the town and spotted a large building that had a red plus symbol on the outside, and the words Casper General Hospital in large lettering spelled out across the side. If he was going to find what he needed, it would be there. He circled the building once, twice before he spotted a human female with dark hair who was wearing a white lab coat and holding some sort of medical bag. Starscream didn't have time to wait, and the human looked medically knowledgeable enough. He flew down, transformed mid-air, landing on the pavement in front of her, standing between her and the vehicle she was supposedly going to. Large cracks spread under his PDs from where he landed. She stumbled back, eyes wide, staring up at Starscream in shock. Normally, Starscream would have relished in the expression of fear he could put into these little squishies, but now he had a job to do. He leaned down to grab her, and she stumbled back. She screamed and dropped her bag, the initial shock wearing off enough to give her the ability to try and run, but she was not fast enough to avoid Starscream's grasp. He lifted the human up to his optics height, and the higher off the ground she was lifted, the more she gripped onto the surface holding her. The greatest sense of self-preservation all human supposedly had, except for his human, apparently. Are you a doctor? Starscream asked the human. The female gasped, with her intake mouth opening and closing over and over again, struggling to find the words. Starscream didn't have time for that. He shook the human somewhat gently. Well, I don't have all day, he snapped. The human looked like she was going to be sick, face pale as she stared up at Starscream, but finally answered, I'm a nurse. And you can heal human injuries? Yes. Starscream nodded. Good. He then reached down and grabbed the bag she had dropped, which hopefully have some supplies she needed, and if the human couldn't do it, he could give the supplies to his knockout to attempt to use. He then tossed her into the air and transformed around her, so until she was sitting in his cockpit, and he set the seatbelt around her, strapping her in tight. She let out yet another scream of fear, gripping the seat hard. Touch any of my instruments, human, and you're getting ejected. He snapped before taking off back towards the Nemesis as fast as he could go. Without the human inside his cockpit passing out from the force, she was no good to him unconscious. She wouldn't cling hard to the seat she was now strapped to. She had just been kidnapped by a Decepticon again. She had no idea who it was or why. Last time it was this awful arachnid trying to get at her son Jack and his Autobot guardian Ace, using her as bait. And now she had no idea. She wasn't used to this stuff. She only just found out about the Autobots recently, and they had been the only ones she ever interacted with. Now this! She thought about grabbing the joysticks in front of her, or banging on the glass and kicking, but the last thing the alien told her was that he would inject her if she tried anything, which would undoubtedly kill her. So instead she tried yelling, "Let me go!" "No," was the short response. She tried to raise one of her arms, but it felt like it was being glued to the chair with the force of the speed the jet was going. June was shaking. She didn't want to be mixed up in this stuff. She didn't want her son to be mixed up in this stuff. And now she was being captured by a tall, scary-looking Decepticon who didn't seem to care about her well-being and was planning to do God knows what with her. "What do you want with me?" she tried, her voice cracking. The jet made a sharp turn, and if he wasn't going fast enough that her head was pressed back into the seat, she probably would be banging it against the glass of the cockpit. "You will soon find out." His voice resonated around her. She felt unnerved by the statement, but knew she didn't have much of a choice. That was when she noticed a huge, flying spaceship that was covered front to back in spikes, and the jet was heading straight for it. That must be the Decepticons' warship she had heard the Autobots talk about. The one that they can't track down no matter how hard they try, which means if she is taken there, they can't get her back. She started to struggle against the seatbelt, but they only tightened in response. "Stop squirming," the Khan demanded, sounding only mildly disgusted with her. He pulled into the landing dock of the ship and slowed to a stop. He then transformed again, only this time, instead of being in his hand like she had expected, she was surrounded in complete darkness. Her heart stopped for a second, having no idea what happened. "Don't make a sound and don't touch anything," came a voice that reverberated around her. She then felt the Khan start to walk, and she was jolted around. She gasped as she realized that she was inside of him. While he was a robot, she didn't even think that was possible. She felt the Khan moving swiftly, almost with urgency, as he tracked more turns than she could keep track of. The clicking of his feet hitting the ground over and over rang in her ears. Suddenly, she was blinded by new light, and the same sharp gray hand was wrapped around her again. She was being pulled out of the jet, now Mac's chest, and held tightly as if he was worried about her trying to run away, like she ever could get off this ship if she did. There, on the other side of the room, was a red Mac who looked a similar height and build to Bumblebee. The red guy was frantically going through and sorting equipment. Up on the screen above him were human anatomy photos and articles about blood loss, cauterization, and burns. She had a terrifying moment of fear looking at the equipment and then the large mech around her. Were they planning to use her as an experiment to find out how humans worked? Cut her up and use her organs? She started shaking again. She knew the Decepticons were evil, but she didn't think they were kidnapping and experimenting on humans. Not until now, anyway. The jet man above her spoke up, grabbing the attention of the red bot. "Knockout, any progress?" The red Khan didn't look up from his work. "After some research, I managed to use the plasma wielder to help cauterize some of the major wounds to stop any excess bleeding, but..." He clenched his fists and threw a piece of tech at the wall, cracking it into pieces. "Nothing will work!" June flinched as the piece shattered across the room. The Khan then turned around to continue ranting before his red and black eyes snapped down to her. He quickly glanced up at the Khan holding her and back to her again. "Starscream, what is that?" he asked incredulously, pointing a sharp finger in her direction. June felt the need to shrink back. The now dubbed Starscream growled in annoyance. "You told me to get a human doctor, so now I have one." He held June out for the Knockout to inspect, and she tensed up immediately, gripping tighter at Starscream's long fingers. "I didn't think you would actually get one," he snapped loudly, throwing his arms out to the side. Starscream held an unimpressed expression and simply held her out and dropped her in front of Knockout, causing him to pull his hand up and catch her at the last second. Knockout used 2 hands to hold her, one underneath and the other just over her, trapping her like a cage. "Well, now we have her, so go fix him," Starscream responded. She looked down at the new hand she was now clinging to and saw that there was blood on it, human blood. Knockout didn't look down at her, only staring at Starscream. "We don't even know if she knows how to deal with your human's injuries." "If Megatron sees this," the con cut off. "I'm aware," Starscream snapped. Knockout grumbled something indistinguishable, and then carried June towards a huge robot medical table, not unlike the one in the Autobot base that Raj had used, and set her down on it. It took her a second to notice the human lying in a pool of blood on the table in front of her. She gasped, eyes wide, and stood silent for a second in shock. Why did the Decepticons have a bleeding human? And why did they want her help? What is going on? "Well, can you fix him, human?" the red guy asked. "Or are you unqualified?" She kneeled down next to the kid. He couldn't be much older than Jack. He was coated in blood. I can try." She looked up at the red mech. "But I need my—" She was stopped when the taller gray one stepped forward and reached into his chest again, producing her medical bag. Mercifully, she had just restocked it and was putting it back in her car for emergencies if anything happened at the base with the kids. The gray bot leaned in closer to her. "Fix him. Your insignificant life depends on it." He then backed off and started pacing around the room, leaving her and Knockout to stand over the human boy on the operating table. This was going to be a long night. Then he slowly blinked his eyes open, the bright lights of the medbay making him squirm. His whole body ached, every muscle screamed in protest. When he attempted to move with a groan, he tried to sit himself up. "Feels like I've been run over by a freight train," he muttered. Knockout, who had been monitoring the readouts of his condition, immediately noticed the movement. "He's awake," Knockout announced to the room, moving towards the bath. Then he turned his head slightly to see the red medic approach. "Knockout." Then he began, his voice hoarse. "I thought you would never touch a skin bag with a stick. Yet here you are, patching one up." A smirk tugged at his lips despite the pain. Knockout huffed, crossing his arms as he gave Danny an extravagant roll of his optics. "Believe me, this is not by choice." Starscream can be very persuasive when he wants to be. He reached for one of his instruments, scanning over Danny more closely, though Danny could feel relief in the medic's field. Then he glanced up to the monitors, articles open about human biology and blood loss all over the screens. Then he laughed despite the pain. "Is that Wikipedia?" His eyes flickered over. "And Quora? How in the world did Knockout even keep him alive?" Then he glanced down at some of his wounds. He could see stitches, even. He knew Knockout's servers were steady. But that steady? Where did he even get the equipment? Then his train of thought was stopped as Starscream quickly walked over to him, looming over him and inspecting his injuries. With sharp optics, the Seeker seemed unusually tense, which made sense. Any injury Danny had in the past, he hid from the con, even when they were minor. Nothing like this. Danny almost died. He honestly wondered what was going through the con's processes right then. He smiled at the con's worry, but the smile turned into a grimace of pain. "I'm still kicking. It takes a lot more than that to keep me down, don't worry." Before he could say more, movement out of the corner of his eyes caught his attention. A human woman with black hair and a white lab coat rushed over. She carried the medical bag with a look of concern on her face, her eyes wide as she glanced between Knockout, Starscream, and Danny. Danny tensed immediately. A jolt of fear shot through him, his EM field betraying his feelings before he could stop it. He flinched slightly and scrambled to his feet when she reached out to examine him. Starscream stared at Danny for a moment and narrowed his optics. "You are afraid of the human?" He sounded utterly baffled at the statement. Obviously, with Danny being so uncaring when it came to the Decepticons, Starscream didn't think a human would pose much of a threat. Then he shook his head quickly, waving off the idea with a shaky laugh. No, it's not that, he said, but his voice wavered. He avoided looking at June directly, focusing instead on Starscream. I'm just not the biggest fan of doctors or scientists. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, feeling her studying his wounds from a few short steps away. You remembered what I told you before, right? He added, glancing meaningful up at Starscream. Starscream's optics flickered with recognition. Back when they were flying, Danny had mentioned how humans hunt what they don't understand, and how he could be experimented on if he was found by the wrong people. Starscream straightened, his wings standing up straight as his optics slid towards June. Very well, Starscream said coldly, his service transforming with a series of sharp clicks into an Emerald blaster. He'll remove the human, then, to prevent any further dangers. The human's eyes widened in shock as the weapon leveled at her, and she instinctively took a step back. Fear flashed across her face. Whoa, absolutely not what I meant, Starscream! Danny cried, immediately throwing himself between Starscream and June, despite the pain in his body. His arms outstretched protectively, standing in the line of fire. His eyes were wide with urgency. We are not killing anyone! Starscream lowered his blaster slightly, but his optics were still narrowed. But you said... I said I don't trust human doctors or scientists, Danny continued, still breathing heavily. But that doesn't mean we go around shooting people. Starscream sighed dramatically and lowered his blaster. Where did you even get a doctor anyway? Why did you get one? Danny asked, still standing in between the woman and the trigger-happy con. Starscream's wings twitched in agitation. Your injuries were too severe for Knockout to fix, so I found a human to help expedite the process and save your already short life, he explained. So you kidnapped someone? Danny gestured wildly to the doctor, possibly nurse, behind him. You can't just do that! Would you rather I let you die? Starscream snapped. Then he was about ready to shout back something about the lines of, sure, if it meant someone wasn't put in danger, but held himself back. Honestly, he wasn't even 100% sure about what he would have wanted Starscream to do, or what else the con could have done in this situation. Then he huffed and turned his back to Starscream, addressing the woman, still visibly shaken. Sorry about everything. I had no idea they would do something like this. He held his hands out placatingly. She glanced over at Danny, concern mixed with confusion. Did they do this to you? She asked, tentatively, her voice barely a whisper, trying not to alert the cons as she gestured towards his injuries. Danny snorted, even though it hurt to laugh. No, they didn't. I just got into a really bad fight with someone a lot uglier than these guys. He glanced up at Starscream. Though they have certainly tried in the past. Starscream huffed, now transforming his blasters back into a service and crossing his arms. Hardly! If I had truly intended to end your miserable existence, you wouldn't be here to complain about it. But there was no real venom behind those words. The woman, still likely unsure of what exactly was going on, seemed to relax a little, though her hands trembled as she looked back at Danny's wounds. Well, whoever did this, you're lucky to be alive. She glanced fairly at the two towering Decepticons. But you need medical attention. Real medical attention. You can't stay like this. Danny flinched, before looking up and giving her a tired smile. Don't worry, I will make it. Believe it or not, I've been through worse. Danny's smile flattered slightly. She looked like she was about to protest, but he stopped her. I will be fine, he repeated quietly. I will get you home safely, I promise. He turned to Starscream, giving him a pointed look. Right, Screamer? Starscream's wings twitched at the nickname. and he sighed dramatically. Fine, I will return you to the location I found you, human, he said with a slight sneer. She blinked up at him in disbelief, glancing between Danny and Starscream repeatedly. You're really just going to take me back? Danny nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. Yep. I'm so sorry about all of this. There is really no more I can do to make it better. He paused. I would say don't tell anyone about this, but I think we both know no one would believe you. The woman had a tight expression on her face at that last bit. Danny held his hand out for her to shake. But really, thank you so much. I appreciate it. She accepted the handshake with a dazed look. Starscream scrolled, tapping his fingers against his arm. All right. I don't have all day. Starscream extended his service towards the woman, who very, very hesitantly let the con grab her. Then he waved as she was lifted into the air, probably having one of the strangest nightmares of a lifetime. Fly safe, you too. Starscream, be back before dinner. He waved his fingers at the con, who merely groaned in expiration. I would totally go, but I'm about to pass out, and I promised Soundwave I would hang out with him in Laser Break today. The woman gave a confused expression before she was placed into Starscream's subspace. Danny promptly laid back down on the medical bed and tilted his head to the roof. He was in so much pain.